a seat talking to the microphone.
Go ahead and state your name for the record, please.
Ross Addiego.
Spell your last name if you would.
Addiego.
Mr. Addiego, how are you currently employed?
As a dolly grip.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a dolly grip does?
I help the camera department in any way possible with camera support. So any camera movement, whether on a dolly, camera cranes, rigging a camera to vehicles, I assist them in any way that I can as a representative from the grip department.
You do this on movie sets?
Movie sets, television sets, music videos, commercials, yes.
Give us a little bit of an idea of your background and experience in the film industry. How long have you been working as a dolly grip or generally kind of as camera supportive crew?
I've been in the industry almost 30 years at this point.
And when we talk about film credits, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we mean when we say film credits.
On a TV show, we wouldn't often be listed at the end of the show. On a movie, you would see credits roll at the end of a movie. But online, there's a database, internet movie database that kind of tracks not only the productions, the shows, the actors, and also the crew, which I would fall under. So that essentially acts as a resume for me.
And on that online database, approximately how many film credits do you have?
Over 100.
And would you say that over 100 is approximately the number of film credits that you really have?
I would say that represents half of my time on set. Certain things don't get, a lot of commercials don't get listed, music videos don't get listed. Most of my TV and film work, I think, is on there.
Okay. So your total amount of credits might be closer to 200?
That's probably a safe assessment, yes.
Okay. And back in October of 2021, how were you employed?
I was employed as the A-camera dolly grip on a little movie called Rust.
So when you say a camera, is there more than one camera?
Yes, that movie had two cameras, an A camera and a B camera.
And is that common?
It is very much common, yes.
Have you ever worked on films that had more than two cameras?
Yes.
And have you worked on films that had only one camera?
Yes.
So as the A camera dolly grip, can you just kind of walk us through what you're doing on set?
In the simplest terms, helping the director of photography capture the director and writer's vision for the project.
And specifically, how are you doing that? Physically, what are you doing?
Again, assisting with the camera movement. On this movie, we had a good number of crane shots, so high and wide, to see the western town or the beautiful environment we were in. A lot of dolly moves, so there was constantly movement throughout the story, whether moving into a set or coming out of a set to reveal other characters.
So what's the dolly and what is the dolly used for?
The dolly is a piece of camera support equipment used in lieu of a tripod or another stable or static camera support apparatus. So the dolly typically has 8 wheels, different size dollies depending on the project, and it also has a hydraulic boom system, so I can, with my controls, boom the camera up and down, whether during the shot or to set up a shot and get the camera where both the director of photography and the camera operator and the director think it best tells the story we're trying to tell in that moment.
And who was the director of photography for this film?
Halyna Hutchins.
And who was the director for this film?
Joel Souza.
And do you recall, was the camera operator for camera A always the same person?
Until the fateful day, it was the same person.
And who was that person?
His name was Andy. His last name escapes me at this moment.
Okay. In this film, was camera A always on a dolly?
No.
So other than the camera filming from the dolly, how else can cameras film?
We did a good bit of handheld. So my cameraman would have the camera on his shoulder, by his hip, and I would assist him with that weight and keeping him safe as he's moving around.
And let me stop you right there.
Yes.
Approximately how much does that camera weigh?
On that project, it was, depending on the lens, 40-ish pounds.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
And then we also had Andy on a man-rideable crane, which means that I could put him on a camera crane that was 20 some odd feet long or longer and kind of put him up in the air to get wide vistas of our sets and locations.
So how long had filming been going on the set of Rust prior to October 21st?
We were a couple of weeks into it.
And when you say a couple of weeks, are we talking, how many days are in the work week?
My recollection is we were doing 5-day weeks, but at some point our weeks shifted. I think we were doing a Tuesday through Saturday schedule, so we were 10 to 12 days in, I believe, at that point.
Okay, 10 to 12 days of actual filming.
Correct.
Okay, because you had weekends.
We did. We typically had whatever our union protocol was, 2 days off, 48 hours or some such.
Now, with regard to all of your film credits, can you tell the jury approximately how many projects you've worked on where there was an armorer on the crew?
Can't give you an exact number, but a dozen or more at this point in my career.
And why would a production company hire an armorer?
Because they plan to use potentially deadly weapons and ammunition.
And what is your understanding of what the responsibilities of a set armorer are?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. May we approach on this?
Sure. Mr. Addiego, based on your experience working on films with armorers, do you know what the armorer is responsible for?
Yes.
Can you tell us?
My understanding of the armorer's responsibilities is any working firearms and any ammunition is under their control.
And when you say that working firearms and ammunition are under your control, are under their control. Let me ask you, in your experience, are there certain industry protocols that are followed on movie sets by armorers?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object again to lack of foundation.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
You've testified that you have worked on 12 movie sets with armorers. Is that correct?
It is correct.
12 or more.
At least 12.
Has that experience made you familiar with what you believe are the industry protocols for armorers on movie sets?
Your Honor, again, I want to object. Same
Counsel
objection.
approach.
Mr. Addiego, in the films that you worked on where there was an armorer, and for the purposes of this question, we're excluding the movie Rust, did you notice certain safety protocols that you yourself saw armorers engage in all of those movies up until you got to the movie Rust?
Yes.
So I'd like to talk to you about those. In the other movies where there were armorers that you worked on, can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how, under what circumstances in your experience can you describe the safety protocols that the armorers on those other movies engaged in when they would bring a firearm onto set for use in filming a scene?
Your Honor, I'm also going to object to relevance. What happened on other movies has no relevance to what happened on Rust.
Response.
Can we approach?
Sure.
All right, Mr. Addiego, let's proceed. Do you recall the question?
If you'd give it to me again, please.
Walk us through your experience with safety protocols by film set armorers when the armorer brings a weapon onto set to be used in the filming of a scene prior to your experience on the set of Rust.
My experience has been that typically the armorers would have some sort of safety meeting or lecture before any of firearms are going to be used in the filming of a scene.
And I'm going to stop you right there. In terms of the safety meeting, who is the person on set, in your experience, who usually calls for the safety meeting?
The first assistant director.
And that would not be Ms. Gutierrez.
No, it would not.
Who was the first assistant director in this case?
The first assistant director on Rust is Dave Halls.
Okay. So you mentioned one of the first things that happens is there is a safety meeting.
Typically, we would discuss, I guess I should back up. Typically, when we receive our call sheets, an email call sheet the night prior to filming.
Okay, hang on just a second, because I don't know that we have very many people here that are in the film industry. What's a call sheet?
So I would receive an email, typically receive an email every night before filming, and that email would include a call sheet that would list who will be on set, both cast and crew. It'll tell us what scenes we're doing, it'll tell us locations, kind of general information for the day, weather, what time the sun goes up and down, whatever production feels is pertinent information. And then a lot of times what they'll attach to that email are the sides, the actual parts of the script we're shooting for the day, and then safety bulletins, whatever union safety bulletins would be appropriate for that day, whether firearms or animals, inclement weather. And then on the day of filming, typically the first assistant director would call for a safety meeting and call all of the cast and crew that would be involved to listen to that meeting. And potentially the armorer may have something to say as far as what we're doing. If we're firing blanks, here's the...
But hang on, I'm going to stop you right there. So hypothetically, if the scene calls for the firing of blanks, because we haven't had a lot of this testimony in trial yet, can you explain to the jurors what your understanding is about the difference in the different loads of blanks?
In my experience, the armorer would tell us if we're using dummies or blanks, and if we're using blanks, which would make a noise and a flash, they would typically describe the power. Quarter load, half load, full load would give us some indication as to the potential danger with that particular firearm being used by the actor in that scene.
And let me stop you right there. You talked about the particular danger. Can blanks be dangerous on a movie set?
My understanding is they can, yes.
And is there certain safety gear that some crew members may use if there is going to be the firing of blanks in their immediate proximity?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jurors what that would be, in your experience?
Certainly. The very basic personal protective equipment we would use would, at the very least, be safety glasses and some form of hearing protection. Pardon me. But sometimes it may be covering the camera operators that may be in jeopardy with special coats to deflect anything coming out of those firearms. We may protect the camera and the lens with special acrylics like Lexan, bulletproof glass, essentially. So, yes, we would take certain precautions.
Is that the reason that it's important for you to know what size blank is going to be used?
Yes.
And with regard to dummies, go ahead and continue to kind of walk us through how this would work.
So typically, depending on the firearms being used, in this case it was a Western, so a lot of the firearms were older Western style 6 guns where you would see if the gun was potentially loaded or not. And sometimes that may simply mean loaded with a dummy round. So if the camera saw the front of the firearm, the audience would think that it was absolutely a loaded firearm, but the dummy rounds typically for us as the crew are different than the blanks in that they may appear as though they're a real bullet, but they would typically have a hole drilled in them, or the primer at the end that would ignite that bullet would be removed or already be pushed in. And then sometimes the dummies, depending on how they're being used in the film, you can't make holes in them. So what I guess the props people that make them put a little BB in there. So the armor can shake that dummy and you would hear a little BB rattle in there, and that's supposed to let us know that that particular bullet or round is safe.
So is this the information that you would receive at a safety meeting?
Both at a safety meeting, and I believe some of this is stated in the safety bulletins put out by IATSE.
And what is IATSE?
IATSE is the union most filmmakers belong to. It's International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees.
And do actors also belong to IATSE?
Typically, no.
Do they have their own union?
I believe they refer to it as a guild, but they would be the Screen Actors Guild is what the actors typically belong to, yes.
Is IATSE the union for crew members as opposed to cast?
It is, yes.
Okay. Now, the call sheet and the email and the safety bulletin that you've referred to, in your experience, who provides that to the cast and crew? Is it the armor?
No, that's generated by production. Someone in production would generate that and get it out to us whether it's an email or given to us on set.
So Ms. Gutierrez wouldn't have been responsible for that?
Not with what I know.
And you indicated that in terms of safety meetings, the safety meetings are called by the assistant director and not the armorer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
With regard to safety bulletins, was there a difference between the way that safety bulletins were handled on the set of Rust and the way that safety bulletins were handled on the other films you participated in that had firearms and armorers?
Yes.
Tell us the difference.
So in those emails that I referred to earlier, it typically would say, please, would ask us to please refer to the appropriate safety bulletins, and then they would list the number of that bulletin. And then in that email, I'd be able to click on a link if I so chose to review that bulletin. I don't recall any of those bulletins actually being attached to our emails during Rust.
You don't recall ever getting a single one?
I don't recall ever receiving a safety bulletin from Rust Productions, no.
Let's jump to safety meetings. On the other sets that you worked on that had guns and armorers, how frequently would a safety meeting occur?
At least once a day, if not more frequently.
And on the set of Rust, how frequently did safety meetings occur?
I don't know that I was invited to more than one. during our couple of weeks on Rust.
So for the entire 2 weeks, you are only aware of one safety meeting.
That's my recollection, yes.
Okay, so we've talked about safety bulletins and safety meetings. Go ahead and continue to walk us through, in your experience, the protocol of an armor with firearms.
In my experience, the armors are usually the, well, for lack of a better description, the most uptight and anal retentive people on set, because they literally have people's lives in their hands. They don't joke around. They don't really have friendly conversations. They stick to themselves and focus on the task at hand. Most of them, in my experience, seem to be either former military or law enforcement and have some sort of background with firearms.
Did you notice a difference then generally in terms of just the behavior, the general behavior on the movie set of the other armors you worked with as compared to Ms. Gutierrez?
Yes.
What was that?
She wasn't necessarily as serious or professional as I'm accustomed to with the other armors that I've worked with.
What do you mean? Give us an example.
I recall walking by her cart a number of times, and firearms and or bandoliers or ammo belts being left out on the cart unsecured. I don't know that I've ever seen an armor pull loose ammo out of a fanny pack. Typically, my experience with armors is any ammo they use, blanks or dummies, comes out of some sort of container, whether it's a labeled box or some other plastic type ammo container. So.
Now, in terms of, you indicated that you would see firearms and gun belts unattended on the cart. Why was that? Why did that stand out to you?
It was out of the ordinary. Again, my experience is most of the firearms I've seen on set come out of some sort of locked bag, locked container. The armor, some armors, depending on the show, have a whole wheel around cart with drawers that they can lock. A drawer that potentially has the individual actor's or character's name on that drawer. So that character's props would live in that drawer under lock and key.
Were the guns and gun belts laying out unattended on the prop cart, was that a safety concern for you?
Yes.
Why?
It seemed inappropriate and out of the ordinary that those firearms weren't secured.
And why is it concerning that the firearms aren't secured?
Well, I don't know that they're completely under the armorer's control if they're not under lock and key.
And what's your understanding of whether those firearms that you saw unattended, were they fake guns or were they real guns?
My understanding, most of the prop firearms we had on Rust were actual working firearms. So.
Okay. Now, based on your experience, just generally, what is the armorer responsible for?
Your Honor, again, this is expert testimony. He's a camera operator, and he's asking to give expert testimony on what armors do.
He's not, sorry.
This is based upon his personal experience only, and as long as it stays there, that's fine.
Go ahead, sir.
If you don't mind the question again, please.
What is your understanding, based on your experience, of the armorer's responsibilities on a movie set?
to control and keep safe all firearms and ammunition on a given set.
Okay. Go ahead and walk us through, if you will, what in your experience are the safety checks that take place when an armorer is bringing a firearm onto the set for filming.
Typically, the first AD, the first assistant director, would notify us that we're going to use firearms for a scene. Whether they're loaded or not, they would say something about the fact that we're bringing something that's maybe not a rubber dummy, but an actual firearm onto set. And then typically the armorer would invite the first AD, the cast members involved, and any crew that would like to see both the firearm and the ammunition to see those safety checks. Whether that's looking through the barrel, shaking those rounds we discussed, the dummy rounds, to hear that BB, or explaining to us that the actor is going to fire X number of blanks and they're going to be of a certain power, and then making sure that anybody that's going to be in close proximity has the appropriate safety equipment they need, and they're prepared for that moment on camera.
So what you just described regarding the armorer showing the gun and allowing people to look down the barrel, why would that be important to crew members?
Because unfortunately there have been accidents in the past where the barrels weren't cleaned in firearms and a blank was fired and whatever debris was in that barrel injured or killed somebody on set.
So with regard to your experiences with Ms. Gutierrez, were the cast and crew ever invited to look down the barrel?
Not to my recollection.
And was that concerning to you?
It was.
Why?
Well, they call them safety checks for a reason, and we were moving through those instead of pausing to have those checks.
With regard to the sequence that you described where the armorer shows the dummy rounds to the cast and crew, and I want to be clear, in your experience, does the armorer hand you the dummy round or the blank so that you can shake it?
No, I'm not actually allowed to touch the firearms or ammo. So if a particular round was in question, we could ask for them to, show us that it is one type of round or another.
And with regard to dummies, how would the armorer do that?
Again, in my experience, the way the dummy rounds are manufactured, you would have one of potentially three indicators that it is not a live round. One being a hole drilled in potentially one side or two sides of the brass, so you'd actually see a hole in the bullet. Sometimes the primer is either already struck by something or it's removed altogether, the primer being the end of the bullet, or they would shake them you'd hear like a rattle because there's a BB inside that brass or steel case.
Who is the person responsible for shaking them for you or showing them to you?
The armorer.
And on the set of Rust, did Ms. Gutierrez do any of that?
Not that I recall.
In your experience on other movies, when is the gun loaded with the ammunition by the armorer? And let me kind of make that more pointed. Is that something that's done away in secret, or is that something that's done in front of cast and crew?
Bless you. No, in my experience, it would be within moments of that safety check where the cast and or crew are invited to see that firearm. They would then load that firearm knowing that we're about to roll the camera. Some armors, for reasons unknown to me, would in fact not even hand that firearm to the actor. They would actually place that firearm in the actor's holster and then indicate to the first assistant director that they're good to go, and then the assistant director typically would call rolling at that point.
So the gun is generally, in your previous experience, loaded with either the dummies or the blanks right there in front of cast and crew.
Correct.
Is that a practice that Ms. Gutierrez followed?
Not to my recollection.
Do you recall ever watching her or taking note of her loading the gun in the presence of cast or crew?
I think there were a couple of times on set where we were doing these quick resets instead of cutting the camera, where she was put in a position to reload that as quickly as she could and hand it back to our actors.
And when you say she was put in a position, who would have put her in that position?
In that particular instance, both the first assistant director that's in charge of safety and the actor producer, Alec Baldwin.
And with regard to your experience on other movies, have you ever seen an armor slow down that pace so that they are not being rushed?
Yes.
Did Ms. Gutierrez ever take any steps to slow those things down if she was being rushed?
Not that I ever saw.
Give me just one moment. Were you present for the filming of every scene that was filmed on the set of Rust during those 2 weeks?
I believe I was present for every scene, maybe not every take.
And when you say take, explain to the jurors what you're talking about.
So the scene may require a couple of, each time we roll the camera and cut, that would be considered one take. So depending on what the director was wanting, or if the actors maybe weren't happy with their performance, we would potentially do multiple takes as we worked our way through the different angles of a scene. So it may be from one actor to the next. You know, we shoot one direction and do a couple of takes with one actor, and then change directions and perhaps a couple of takes with the next actor that's in that same scene with them.
So with regard to the individual takes that were recorded, were you present for every single take that was filmed?
I was not.
Approximately, if you can give us a percentage, what percentage of those individual takes were you present for?
I think it would be safe to say I was there for 95% or more of them.
Okay. In terms of the way that you've experienced this on other movie sets, how does the armorer behave with regard to if the armorer provides a gun to an actor. In your experience on other movie sets, does the armor just walk away?
In my experience, the armor's never out of eyesight of whatever weapons or ammo they're in charge of.
Was that the case on the set of Rust?
It was not.
Describe to us what you saw on the set of Rust with regard to that particular issue, that being the armor always staying within eyesight of the gun.
I don't know that the armor was always within eyesight of the firearms being used on set.
Okay. And do you recall being present on the set of Rust on a day where there were what I'm going to refer to as accidental discharges of guns?
Yes.
Can you describe the first accidental discharge that you recall happening?
I think the first one was I don't know if the prop master was loading or unloading.
And let me stop you. What's the prop master's name?
Sarah, I think her name was Sarah Zachary.
Okay.
Was her name. She was, we were outside of the character Rust's cabin, and I don't know if she was loading or unloading a handgun, but unannounced to any of the crew, that firearm discharged. So we consider that a negligent discharge.
And how did you know it discharged?
I was within feet of it, and she seemed pretty spooked when I turned around, and it appeared as though she had shot that firearm at her foot.
Can you tell us, in your experience, in your opinion, what you think that gun was loaded with?
It made a bang, but it didn't, I don't know if there was a bullet or not, because I don't know if it hit her foot, but it certainly made a loud noise that spooked us and the animals we had on set. I think we had a couple of horses on set, and again, it was unannounced, so it was a surprise to everybody that was around.
Were you preparing to film a scene or a take at that time?
Yes.
Was it announced by anyone whether the guns were going to be loaded with dummies or blanks?
I don't think at that moment it had been, no.
Okay. So when that accidental discharge happened, what did it sound like?
A gun going off?
Okay. And you indicated that this accidental discharge occurred because that gun was being loaded or unloaded by the prop master, Sarah Zachary. Is that right?
That's correct.
In your previous experiences on other movie sets with armorers, did you ever see the prop master loading and unloading the guns?
I've never seen that, no.
And can you describe what the other accidental discharge was that happened?
So like I had stated, we were kind of outside the cabin we were using as Halyna Rust's cabin.
And I'm going to stop you real quick. Who's Halyna Rust?
Halyna Rust is the lead character in the movie, and that was played by Mr. Alec Baldwin.
Okay, please continue.
I believe it was Alec's stunt double, so somebody dressed up to look like Alec, was going to be firing either some sort of long gun. I don't remember if it was a lever action gun or a shotgun, something out of the window of the cabin towards, I think it was the law enforcement that were chasing him, that were starting to catch up with him. There was supposed to be some gunfire, and I believe that Hannah was prepping the stunt double in the cabin with that firearm, and again, unannounced to any of us outside the cabin, that firearm was discharged.
And what did it sound like?
A loud gun going off.
And if you can estimate, how much time passed between the first of these accidental discharges and the second?
My recollection is they were within an hour of one another.
And in your experience on other movies with armorers, are accidental discharges common?
No.
Have you ever experienced an accidental discharge on another movie?
I don't know that I have.
Council, is it okay if we take our
Certainly.
Okay. All right, we're going to take our afternoon break. Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. We'll start again at 2:45. Thank you.
All rise.